I appreciate the fact that I was where I was at the time and did it with as much integrity as I had at the time, and honesty and courage and all that. And somehow it's helped me make me who I am today. It's a part of my shadow past. I'm going to embrace that because it's a part of my story.
Welcome to Voices of Deconversion. We share the inspirational stories of deconversion told by former Christians who are now atheist or agnostic. Our stories remind us we're in it together. They encourage us as we discover who we are and help us to embrace who we become. Now here's Steve with today's guest.
Welcome back, everyone. This is episode 24, part 2, the second half of my conversation with David Hayward of nakedpastor.com. We pick up the story as David is going through a very rough period in his life. He describes it as the perfect storm. There were a lot of changes happening in his life at that time, and he goes into kind of how he and his wife are on different pages. It left him numb and sort of in shock after leaving the church. He goes into details about what eventually got him in trouble with the church right before he left. And he talks a little bit about the sense of purpose that one has when they're in the ministry for years, and then all of a sudden that's gone. One of the other insights that David brought to this conversation that stuck with me was how having compassion for our previous selves, the Christian version of ourselves, how having compassion for that person then corresponds to how we show compassion to others. So his insights on that were really neat and really stuck with me after the conversation. If you haven't listened to part 1 of episode 24, go back and listen to it. It sets up part 2 of David's story in this episode. This was just a wonderful conversation, and David has some really great insights. Several of them really stuck with me, and I hope you get as much out of this episode as I did. Here's the second half of my conversation with David Hayward.
I went for a very rough period where, it was like the perfect storm. I left the ministry. It was my whole life, my whole vocation. So I left behind a paycheck. Our kids we were suddenly empty nesters. Our kids had all left home. We had to file for bankruptcy because, just years of ministry drove us into the ground financially. And Lisa had started university to get her nursing degree. All these things came at the same time. It was a perfect storm, and I was a mess. I was really a mess. I got help because Lisa said, "You need help." So I got help, and the struggle still remained. Though Lisa and I had been a team, basically a team on the same side for so many years, and on the same page. And now no longer she's doing her thing, I'm doing my thing, and we're each developing our own, inner life and belief system, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And we were very much on different pages. So that took a lot of adjustment. Yeah, it was a difficult transition to make.
Where's she at now spiritually?
Well, I'd say we're in the same book.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. And she's very, very open-minded, and she'd probably identify as a Christian, probably, but very, very off the deep end progressive, probably. Okay. And we don't go to church.
Yeah.
So, and don't feel the need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you were going through a lot of this, you said you were, it was the perfect storm. Just a basic question. How did you get through it? I mean, emotionally, how did you get through that?
The first year, I thought I was doing great after I left the ministry and after I left the church in 2010. But then it was one day Lisa sort of sat down across from me and looked me in the eyes and said, "David, you really need help." And, I have a lot of critics tell me that anyway. They say, "You need help."
You need help, yeah. You're like, not the first time.
Yeah. She said it compassionately, like she cares for me. So
yeah,
I found a counselor and a coach, got some friends that understood, and I talked it through. It took a couple of years to work through all the shit. It took a lot of work to untangle all of what I was going through. The first year, I thought I was fine, but actually I was numb. I was just frozen.
Man, that's a good way to put it. Wow.
Yeah, because here I've been doing this my whole friggin' life, and And now it was over. It was like cold turkey, like sudden withdrawal.
You were
So
in shock.
I was in shock.
I
Exactly.
mean, I'm imagining someone who's like been in a car accident and they get out of their car and they're just kind of like a zombie, like walking around. They don't know what's happened. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how I'm imagining what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Kind of.
yeah, I wasn't feeling anything, which was good because I'd always felt tension and in the church and frustration and anxiety and all. Now I wasn't feeling anything. I thought that was good, but I wasn't feeling anything, nothing, not even happiness.
Yeah.
So not even anger or frustration or anything. So I suppose it's like the first stage of death and dying was like just denial or
Yeah.
something. So it took a long time of speaking with therapists, talking with a coach, having coffee with friends or beer or wine or whiskey, whatever, talking it out with Lisa. And then at the same time, in 2012, I started an online community called The Lasting Supper. And they've been incredible. They're an incredible group of people who have deconstructed
Oh.
Christian agnostics or even atheists. Really diverse group, and someplace where it's just safe to be honest with your questions and your journey. And just a little plug: if you want to join, go to www.thelastingsupper.com. And yeah, they really helped me too. Really great bunch of friends there. And so it took, after a couple of years, maybe around the year 2015, I felt like I was okay. I was going
Wow.
to make it. Yeah.
And for you, how much more intense for someone who had been a pastor? You said for 30 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I know of other people who've been, in the ministry that long and then they deconverted, and it's just, I deconverted when I was in college training to be a pastor. It was my end of my junior year, getting my biblical studies degree, and I was in that denial phase, and I've told this story a million times, but I'm washing dishes. We live on campus, and my wife and I are talking, and I'm getting real liberal with like, was Jesus just a good teacher, or like I'm kind of going there, and I just remember at one point she just goes, "You're not a Christian anymore," and I thought I was still a Christian. I just looked at her and I went, "What?" Like I was in complete like I was not paying attention to what was happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was not understanding it, and I think about that a lot. Like it's just it's the shock, it's the denial. And I always say that's when my denial phase ended. I had not been
Right.
processing what was happening at all, and at that point it was like. Shit hit the fan, the rubber hit the road. I mean, like that's
Yeah.
when things got real. That's when it was like,
Yeah.
oh shit, like I've got a problem. I've got one more year. Do I finish my degree? Like, okay, I guess I'll finish it. And then it's, oh, well, do you then go, do I just be a pastor and not tell people? Like, because this is my livelihood.
One of the hardest things for a pastor or even regular people when they leave the church or they leave the ministry is their job has so much meaning. Like there was so much purpose to it,
Yeah.
and even a sense of destiny. And then when you leave and you just go get a regular job, it's like it doesn't. You want to do something that changes the world.
Right, right.
And here you are in a
Yeah,
cubicle and to convince some poor old lady to buy health insurance. You know what I mean?
right, right. Oh,
But it
yeah.
just doesn't lack. It just doesn't have the same zing to it. And so that for me was really huge. Was giving up that whole illusion, I'm going to call it,
Yeah.
of life having meaning that we would be able to understand, or that we would have a destiny that we would know, and
Right.
and all that kind of thing. So
There's one analogy comes to mind that I read somewhere that it's like, and this comes across as, maybe condescending, but it's not intended to be. It's like in the Toy Story cartoons when Buzz Lightyear goes from being a superhero in an epic,
yeah,
you like space like saga, and he's got to fight,
yeah,
Zorg or whatever the
yeah,
bad guy's name is, and yeah, he goes from that to like you're just a toy, he's got to cope with like
yeah,
you're really not in this huge like epic story. It's just real life, and
yeah,
that is a hard cloud to come down from and
yeah,
realize like, oh, okay, like it's not
yeah.
as yeah, it's basically what you said. Yeah.
And to me, that big struggle with does life have meaning? Uh, it's never left. And in fact, there's some really good philosophers out there like Terry Eagleton. He writes a book on the meaning of life, I think it is. It was a really good book. And he just comes to the conclusion, life has to be played like kind of like impromptu jazz. We don't know where it's going. It can be beautiful. Sometimes it's confusing, but maybe the only point to life is that we should just love each other.
Yeah.
And basically that's it. And that's a lot different than go ye into all the world and preach the gospel and grow the kingdom and change people's lives and rescue people from the edge of death and from Satan's jaws. And it's like a huge difference.
And do it before Armageddon happens, like there's this huge ending that's coming and you better like save as many people as you can,
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, at what point did you realize you were not a Christian anymore? Because you said that you left the church and then you and your wife are kind of wrestling with all that. How much time went by from when you left the church to when you realized, okay, I'm not a Christian?
So I don't like labels, but at times they're convenient. So there's some things inside of me that can be labeled Christian. There's some things inside me that can be labeled agnostic. There's some things inside me that can be labeled Buddhist. Some things inside me that can be labeled atheist. And so I'm a very mixed stew of things. And for me, so if somebody would say, you're not a Christian, I would probably answer, yes, I am, just to bug them. And if somebody, you're a Christian, thank God, I'm saying, well, no, not really, So, it's for me, it's just, a convenient way to try to understand where somebody's at. For me, what's beyond these labels? What's beyond these words? Is there any meaning? Is there any reality or truth beyond all these things? Now, I can answer, I knew the time when I no longer was no longer accepted as a Christian.
Right.
And that was like as soon as I left the church, that was a confirmation for them that I was no longer a believer, no longer a pastor, no longer called to ministry, and no longer a Christian. So that's people's perception. But I don't know. I still appreciate many Christian writings and so on. Like, for example, Meister Eckhart. I mean, the stuff he writes, I gel with. I just the mystic kind of side of things, and which is now we call it philosophy now. But so yeah, the philosophers and so on, they're all playing around with those words and those languages and those things that are attempting to understand what's the deeper meaning behind these things. So that's a very convoluted way to answer your question.
No, that's okay. And I was completely forgetting what we talked about earlier in the sense that you consider yourself like a Christian atheist. And I like that. And I also agree that I don't like labels to an extent either. And to the extent that I like them, it's for convenience. It's for simplicity. I have two Christians in my life that are, sort of close to me. One of them pretty close, the other one not so close, but, and I'll say something like, I'm an atheist, and they're both educated in the Bible, and actually they're both clergy or former clergy, and I'll say I'm atheist, and they're like, well, I really think that you're more agnostic, like, 'cause you can't know, right? Yeah. I'm like, well, okay, if you want to get technical, yeah, probably an agnostic atheist is the best way to describe it, but I can call myself whatever I want. I get to choose that. And when you were talking about, part of me might be more Buddhist, this part of me might, it's like, well, yeah, but we're 100% human, right? So that's probably the important part. Our beliefs can change, evolve. We can take parts from all different traditions, and that's okay. Like you said, the bigger picture is how are we treating each other, and how are we living in the world?
Right.
Yeah.
So there's 4 categories that members of the Lasting Supper fall under. There's some believers, there's some agnostic believers, there's some agnostic atheists, and there's atheists. So that's a pretty good way to categorize where on the spectrum people might find themselves at any given time. I don't believe that there was a historical Jesus Christ. And a lot of I believe there may have been a man who was a great teacher, but that all the mythology and all the hopes and expectations of the time were projected onto this man and then developed further, that became the whole Christian church and movement and theology and all that. Now, that isn't to say that none of it's true. Historically, everything falls under question because we don't know. And all the mythology of the Middle East at that time and Egypt and so on, it's just cram-packed full of parallels and similarities with the languages and stories being used in the mythology. So, but it's like, mythology doesn't mean it's false.
Right.
Is there truth to it? So, yeah, I think there's truth to it. I think the whole idea that God emptied himself and became man, and that wherever we are gathered together, there the Spirit is, that kind of thing. That's all a mythological way of saying we're all one and we're God. I'm sorry to tell you, there's no God up there in the heavens. We are the divine. We are, and I don't mean that with a capital D.
Right.
I'm just saying that we're it. This is it. Let's take responsibility. Let's love one another. Let's do justice in the world. Let's be inclusive, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, I think the Christian symbolism and metaphors and mythology is very, very powerful way of trying to understand the world and reality. And that in that way, I would say, yeah, I appreciate Christianity, and I still consider myself a part of that whole story, but not to the exclusion of everything else.
When you were talking, it made me think of a kind of a theme that I've been talking to my wife about a lot lately, and to various non-believers, is when you become a non-believer, when you leave the church, we'll just say, there is, as a Christian, dependence on God to ultimately save you, to ultimately work things out. We try hard to work out our faith on our own, but at the end of the day, if things don't go right, God will make it right, either in this life or the next. So I think what that does is it fosters this learned helplessness in the Christian to depend solely on prayer and hope and wishing that God will just make it better. When you walked away from the church, did you have a hard time with the idea of having to now own your future? Was that a part of your faith, that idea of kind of depending on God for everything?
Yeah, totally. Did you ever see the movie The Train? It's an Old West, not an Old West.
Is it like 312 to Yuma?
Yeah, 312 to Yuma.
Yeah.
And the guy, they're looking for deputies to take this criminal, Russell Crowe, to Yuma in order to stand trial. And this farmer guy is like, he's going to do it. And his wife's like, don't, he's so dangerous. And she's so worried for him. And he's saying, he said, I have been waiting for God to rescue me for so many years, and it's just not happening. I got to do this myself. And when I watched that, I said, that's me. That's so me. It was like, yeah, I felt my number one task was to become responsible for my life.
Wow.
There's not only learned helplessness, there's learned ignorance as well, where we just say, oh, I don't know, God knows. Or I can't do it, God will do it, kind of thing. And I knew at that point I had to abandon those ridiculous ideas.
Wow.
And I had to take personal responsibility for my life. And, it makes life a lot more interesting, that's for sure. But I feel more engaged. I feel actually more engaged with life now.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Rather than cocooned or sheltered from it.
Yeah. Now I embrace that idea. Now I love that idea that like I control my destiny. And if something's going to happen, I need to make it happen. It's not going to just magically work out. And there were things in my life when I was younger that I kind of just hoped God would make come true. And, I was trying to make them come true in my life, but the best I could. But ultimately it was like, okay, well, it's God's will, whatever happens, that kind of thing. So I totally I guess identify with that whole struggle and that whole idea.
I remember one of the cartoons I did before I left the ministry that got me in trouble. And that was one where I drew a picture of a girl in a wheelchair in front of a grave. The backstory is she's been in an accident and her partner was killed and she's in a wheelchair. And I can't remember exactly what's on her T-shirt, but it says something like, "I used to believe in miracles." I wrote very candidly in that post. And this is me after being in the church for so many years. And I've been around. I've been in the Pentecostal church. I've been in the Baptist church. I've been to exorcisms. I've been to healing services. You name it. I've been there. And I have never seen a miracle. Okay? I've never seen anybody healed. Okay? That being said, miraculous things have happened in my life, like weird things I can't explain.
Right.
But I have never at a healing service seen anybody, somebody says, "Oh, my headache's gone," or "My back feels better," kind of thing. But I've never seen anybody grow a leg or anybody come to life. And, these were all going around as stories, resurrections and people growing limbs and blind people. I've never seen it. And I just was honest. I just said, I've never seen it. I'm not saying it's never happened. I'm just saying I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And I got in so much trouble over that. Because I was just being honest. I've never seen it. To just say, just to be honest with myself and to be honest with other people, I haven't seen a healing.
And that happened after you left the church and you're doing these cartoons?
No, that happened before.
Okay. You were in the church and you wrote that and you did wow. Yeah, I bet you got in trouble.
Yeah. Well, then why are you praying for me?
Yeah. What was, for you, was there anything you hung on to that was really hard to say goodbye to from your older life, your previous life?
Definitely. I think the church's greatest asset, to be honest, isn't its theology or its morality or, its buildings or its music or anything like that. I think its greatest asset is its ability to form community really quickly. You walk into a church, you're handed friendships on a platter. It's like immediately you've got a network of friendships, you've got a life, you've got a calendar of events, and you've got children for your kids to play with. You've got babysitters. Like, it's amazing. This is church's greatest asset.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing Lisa and I miss the most is community. It's like, where do you go for anything like that? I mean, where? Yeah. I mean, you can join this group or that group or whatever, but there's nothing like that ability to form community really quickly. And unfortunately, with a lot of community in the church, there's a lot of conformity required. But in the last church we were in, there wasn't that. It was just, you were allowed to be you and to be authentic and everything. And yeah, we missed that. That was the hardest thing. So it took us a long time to learn how to, as not being churchgoers, how to build real friendships outside the church. It's quite a challenge, quite a skill. Yeah. Come to find out, though, a lot of people I know don't have a lot of friends, and it does take work and effort.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was the most helpful thing for you in this transition? You went through some tough stuff, and some difficult transitions. What was the most helpful thing for you?
Single malt scotch. No.
Good answer.
I say that half joke.
That's funny.
What was the most helpful thing? I'll tell you, is getting help. Like, I don't recommend doing it on your own because it is serious business. And so I found a really, really good counselor, and I paid good money for them and a good coach. I found an online community. Well, I founded it. I founded the community, The Lasting Supper.
Well, that's a good lesson, though. Sometimes you have to create the community that you want.
Yeah. And I couldn't find anything like what I loved. I'm patting myself in the back here a bit, but I'm really good at facilitating authentic communities. And so it's just a really powerful community. So that really, really helped me survive. And it's people, right? It was just being with other people, people who would listen and people who would, give me some good advice and support. So That's what helped me through.
That's great. And that was a huge loss for me, had the loss of community. But then I started this podcast to basically, one of the things I was looking forward to with it is just connecting with people, like-minded people,
Yeah.
But I do get a lot of that from, we have a Sunday assembly group around here, and that has helped a lot.
Is it the atheist?
It's basically church for people who don't believe in the supernatural, but it also is inclusive, so anyone can come. So there's a Muslim has come, or actually comes on a regular basis. We had a Christian, kind of a liberal Christian, come for a while, but most people are atheist or agnostic, I'd say.
Yeah.
But it's great.
Cool.
It's like what you're saying. I mean, it provides that community, and it's a brand new idea for non-believers, and we haven't had 2,000 years to perfect it. That's the loss. That's the discrepancy between the two. But
Yeah.
But absolutely, yeah.
Something we talk about this a lot in the Lasting Supper is I think the intensity of community sometimes that some churches have, where you know everything about everybody and you confess your sins. There's no secrets. You have to be totally out there, and that sort of unlimited knowledge you have of other people. I don't think that's natural, and I don't think it's healthy. There's so many dangers. There's just so many dangers.
Yeah.
So when a lot of Christians leave the faith or leave the church, it's like they're looking for that intensity again in relationships that isn't healthy, and it's not real. I don't want to know all your sins. That's your business.
Yeah.
Right? Have you seen some of the documentaries on, like, say, Netflix? CNN had one on not long ago about cults, a cult leader. I think he's now in Hawaii or something.
Okay.
And sexual assault, all kinds of shit going on in these communities, right? These communes with these cult leaders. But they were all, and the people who had escaped were all crying and sad because they missed the community. But holy smokes, they were being violated. Their space was being violated all the time. But there's something sexy about violating space when you're allowed to and supposed to, and in these intense little communities we call church. And so it's really difficult. It was difficult for me to just be a normal person in a normal world with normal relationships and not expect to feel all the warm fuzzies that we used to feel in the Christian church, because I think they were illicit, to be honest with you.
Yeah. They come with this, like you said, this intensity, and you're too connected. You know too much.
Too connected.
There should be boundaries between people.
It's codependent. It's codependency.
Yeah.
Like I think we should be independent so that we can be interdependent and not codependent.
Yeah, that's excellent.
With the what you call the gathering on Sundays.
Yeah, Sunday assembly. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you'll ever feel the depth of intensity of community that you ever felt in the Vineyard Church, because most people would go like, "You mind your own business. Stay out of my face." You know what I mean? That's my business.
Yeah.
We can relate. We can talk. We can talk even about personal things, but this is my space that I respect and you need to respect, right? So, but those rules never applied in a lot of my Christian background. You had to, unless you spilled all your guts, you weren't full inclusive member.
You weren't. So, you weren't coming clean with God.
Yeah. I mean, I had friends in Bible college who were kicked out because they confessed they masturbated.
Oh my gosh.
So they confessed they masturbated and they got kicked out of Bible college.
Oh no.
That's the kind of level of intensity of community that it's just not healthy. You don't want that in the Sunday assemblies, right? You just don't
absolutely not. Yeah. It's just wild. I mean, I know of a couple that had got caught like making out or something. I think it was. And they were both going to a Christian college, and they ended up getting kicked out of it for that.
Oh, I do too. I know many like that. We just never got caught.
Yeah, the rest of us, right? Yeah, it always happens at like BYU. You'll hear some kid like, admitted to having sex, with a fellow student. I mean, like, a normal relationship, like two 20-year-olds, are dating and they end up having sex, and it's like they end up getting kicked out of their university. It's just, now when you hear it, it's just like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Let them live their life. And by the way, their life is none of your business, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Well, when you think back on your previous life, if I can call it that, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you think about, did you go by Pastor David?
No, just David.
David. What do you think about, well, what do you think about the Pastor David? What do you think about your previous life, or when you think back on those times, what do you think about yourself?
No, that's an important question, because this is one of the things I try to help other people process. I recommend figuring out a way to integrate your life in a loving, compassionate way. So I know some people who look on their past, maybe as a pastor, as a Christian, and they hate it. They hate themselves. They're embarrassed and ashamed and so on. Well, why not look at it with a sense of humility, and look at it like you were looking at your younger self, and just say, hey, that's just where you were at the time. That's just where you were. You were honestly searching. You were honestly hungering for something. This seemed to satisfy you at the time. Just accept it as that, and move on. Somehow integrate that, individuate it into your life, and appreciate, like Carl Jung says, you need to embrace your shadow. Well, you need to embrace your past somehow as well. If you reject it and deny it, then I think you're in danger of cutting off some roots that might bring some nutrition your way.
Yeah.
It's like, compost is made of both shit and dirt, right? So that's the way I look on my past. Part of it's earth and part of it's just shit. But together it makes a very rich compost. It makes me who I am today.
Yeah.
And I recommend other people try to figure out a way to do that. Now, I know it's more difficult for some if they've had really extreme abuse, did something horrendous or whatever. It's more difficult. But I think the way I look on my past is I wouldn't do that now. I wouldn't want to be a pastor now. But I appreciate the fact that I was where I was at the time and did it with as much integrity as I had at the time, and honesty and courage and all that. And somehow it's helped me make me who I am today. It's a part of my shadow past. I'm going to embrace that because it's a part of my story.
That was a hard thing for me, was the idea of, why did this happen to me? Why did I have to be duped, raised in a Christian family, go down this path of ministry, and then right when it should have gotten really good for me, I graduate, I head into my career, right? Right when my life's supposed to take off, the plane breaks or something, right? Like it's grounded. It doesn't, and then now I got to figure out what the hell to do.
Yeah.
Something that means a lot to me is this movie called Mr. Nobody. And it's a very abstract, kind of odd movie, but there's this quote at the end, and he's this old man, like in his hundreds, and there's this journalist listening to him talk about his life. And he's told through this movie, he's told 3 different versions of his life. And the journalist is like, well, tell me these 3 different things. They can't all be true. And then he goes, you mean to say we have to make choices? And then the guy goes, well, which one's the right one? And the old man sits up very adamantly and he goes, everyone is the right one. Each path is the right path. And I love that because it helped me go, you know what? The way your life turned out is okay. Like, it's okay. And don't bother yourself with the what ifs, because it only makes it worse to think, what if this, what if that? You put me in the same scenario all over again, and it probably turns out the exact same way. Yeah. Because I am who I am. I reacted to my environment the way I did, as did you or anyone else. Yeah. But it almost affirms your life. That quote to me affirms, no matter how good or bad someone's experience in life, or how many regrets you have, like, it affirms it. It's good because it's yours. It's good because this is the path that you took, and it's the right path. I like that quote a lot. Yeah.
Well, I really believe having compassion for all living things is a really good maxim to abide by. And if I can't love my own previous selves, how am I going to love other people who may fall in those categories or whatever? So, I'm just loving myself. loving my previous selves, which are really previous selves.
Right.
They're all me.
Right.
But yeah, so it's just, you know, there are still things I'm embarrassed by. Like, I can't believe I got caught up in that whole charismania stuff. But, I can't believe that I so adored a certain leader that I did things that I would never do today.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot, and I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't be able to be helping the people I'm helping right now if I didn't have those experiences behind me. I understand spiritual abuse. I understand religious abuse. I understand deconstruction. I understand the abuse of power. I understand, cognitive dissonance. I understand bad theology. I understand, et cetera,
Yeah.
because I've been there.
Yeah.
So I think, my atheist friends, and some of them I've helped become atheists who are very strong evangelical believers, we're able to talk about all these kinds of things because they can talk about their very religious previous lives. And in relation to who they are now as very strong atheists,
Mm-hmm.
they're totally cool. That's just who they were at that time.
Yeah. And it's good to talk to someone like you for them, because you're not going to judge them for that, because that was you.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And as hard as I can be, or on fundamentalism or evangelicals, or as much as I like to poke fun at them sometimes, that was me, so I'm doing it not in like malice. I'm not doing it to like just break them down and make them feel dumb. It's because that was me. I believed the Bible was inerrant, and I believed all the silly little miracle stories. I did. And I don't want to mock people for believing those things as much as I think they're silly or ridiculous, or how could you believe that? Yeah, that's an important piece of it, is being able to take your past. It informs who you are today. And that's huge, because if you or I or anyone else didn't have our past, we wouldn't be who we are today. We wouldn't be able to do certain things that are really, really positive.
Yeah, you wouldn't be doing this podcast if you didn't have your experiences.
Exactly.
It's the same with the family I grew up in, my mom and dad and everything, who I love, but they didn't raise me with the religious culture and everything that I was raised in maliciously. That's just where they were at, and where they are still at. They still don't understand me.
Yeah.
I know they love me, but they don't understand me at all. But that's okay. That's where they're at. So what brings a lot of suffering for me is if I hold on to a fantasy relationship I might have with my father or whatever, or my mother. Instead, I need to embrace them for who they are, where they are, and say, just, they didn't mean any harm. And, I've survived, and not only survived, I learned a lot from it. And I really like where I'm at right now. So
that's awesome. I love that. It's such a positive thought, just.
Although I'm not always there. Sometimes I am upset, but that's generally where I come back to. Yeah.
That's real life,
Yeah.
Is there something that you learned or experienced that you might not have if you were still in the ministry, still a Christian?
Well, now I know what it's like to still want to be a part of, so Christianity and the church is my family of origin. I've moved out, but I wish, I don't wish. I have learned, though, that once you move out, you're never welcome back.
Wow.
Really. That's basically, unless you repent and rededicate your life and everything like that, which I won't do. So if you do leave home, that really is forever. I call such people spiritual refugees. You're basically kicked out of your country. You're not welcome back, and no other country. You don't know where to go, right? You don't have any resources. You don't know what to do, because once you're either in or you're out. The church provides all kinds of resources for you while you're in the church, but when you leave, there's nothing to help you figure out where to move to. So that's I've learned a lot about that on my journey since.
What would you say, though, so that's what you learned that you would not have known if you had stayed in Christianity? Just
right.
Kind of how either you're in or you're out, that whole idea.
Yeah.
Okay. When you think back on your deconversion experience, if you would call it that, but that idea, what are you most proud of?
I'm proud that I found the courage to keep going because there was a lot of pressure not to. Now, I'd taken a lot of years to find my courage, to find my own voice, and to, once I found my own path, to stick to it. But I am proud of the fact that I did stick to it. I was getting all kinds of feedback from all over the place that I was going down the wrong path, but I was determined. I felt like a pioneer. I had to find my own land and lay a stake in it and settle, although not settle. I'll always be a pioneer. Pioneer, once it's in your blood, it's in your blood. So like I'm curious, intellectually curious. I insist there must be a way that all this fits together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm proud of the fact that I think I'm onto something. So
that's cool.
It's because of my persistence. Yeah.
I love that. I felt I wouldn't have worded it that way, but I like that a lot. I wouldn't have thought to word it like as a pioneer.
Yeah.
But that's exactly how I felt when I was learning all these things about the Old Testament being interpreted as allegory by a lot of mainline Christians, and I didn't know that before. And it felt so exciting. So at the same time, I'm feeling like sort of scared, like, where's this going? I'm not certain. I'm a little afraid. But then at the same time, it's exciting and exhilarating. Like you're blazing your own path, and you're I don't know. You put it better than I did, but yeah, you're being a pioneer and you're kind of making your way. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm being a pioneer for me first and foremost. Like I just want to explore. And I'm drawing maps. I'm kind of like the Canadian Thompson who worked for the Hudson Bay Company and drew all of Canada made a map, all of Canada, northern Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that. He did it just because he loved to do it, but he changed, the face of Canada. He changed the world really. And, so I'm doing this for myself because I must. I feel responsible for myself, so I'm doing it for me. And I think I'm helping other people as well. I'm giving voice to their similar journeys. Yeah. So that's kind of cool.
Absolutely. Well, when you think back over the entire course of your experience from when you were young and raised in the church, you become a pastor, you're going to seminary, you do all that, and then you eventually leave the church. When you think about that whole thing, is there a thread that carries through, something that's a part of you, that you can recognize when you look back from the earliest years until now? What about you stayed the same?
A few things. I've already mentioned one. I don't like being controlled. That includes my mind. So that intellectual curiosity, I from a very early age, I was a reader, and my creativity. So I'm an artist as well. And from a very early age, I remember drawing, and so those all three work together. I think my intellectual curiosity, I don't want to be controlled, and I want to be creative. These all combined into a powerful kind of a nitroglycerin kind of a mix, and it's an explosive mix for me where I'm constantly reading, trying to understand. I'm thinking and contemplating, trying to understand. I'm expressing it in my art and in my writing and cartoons and everything. And so I think I've always been that way, but I kept finding bigger fish bowls to fit in until finally in 2010, I realized I don't need a fish bowl. I can swim in the whole friggin' ocean if I want. So that's where I am now. I just feel that kind of freedom. And I did it by degree.
Yeah.
Some people jump right out of the small fish bowl into the ocean. That has its dangers. But I grew exponentially into bigger and bigger fish bowls till I realized, hey, I don't need a fish bowl, and jump right into the big one. So I think that's been my story. Yeah.
That's cool. It's the freedom, the liberation to be able to think how you want to think and create how you want to create and not feel constrained by anything.
A lot of people do think the way they want to think, but they don't let it out because they're afraid of rejection or ridicule or being kicked out or whatever. But for me, for some reason, being an artist, what I'm thinking needs to come out.
Yeah.
It needs to be expressed, right?
Yeah.
And that's where my inner reality finally gelled with my outer reality.
Yeah.
As soon as you express what you're thinking, that's when you're going to have to leave the herd.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You gotta fall in line.
Well, to fall in line.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, what do you like best? I'm gonna go with the phrase Christian atheist because that's kind of the only label that we kind of talked about, or you kind of liked that label, so we'll go with that. So what do you like best about being a Christian atheist?
I feel really, really free. Like I think through my blog and everything, I'm free to explore. I don't, no party owns me. So what I really love about where I'm at now is that sense of freedom. Nobody owns me. Nobody seems to want me. I'm just doing my thing, and I'm passionate about it. I love what I do, but I'm just doing my thing. And by the way, I'm helping some people. So
Yeah.
that's really what I like. My wife and I are together. Our 3 kids are doing awesome. We just went on a camping trip last week. The 5 of us happened to be home all at the same time, and I was free to do that. We're free to talk about anything. I'm not worried about getting fired or rejected or signed on or anything. Like I've worked hard for it, and it's worth it. It's been really worth it. So
That's great. What a happy ending to. It's not the ending, but it's not the end. But what a happy ending to this whole saga.
yeah, it is a happy ending.
Well,
Yeah.
is there anything that we haven't discussed that you wanted to bring up or share? I mean, it can be about your story or about what you do.
Oh, I think we really hit on everything. I am starting another group. I'm going to try to be launching it on Monday called Yes Creatives, where I just help people unleash their creativity. And so I think everybody is creative. Everybody in some way is creative, and just help people unleash that and to find and free themselves and maybe even make some money while they're at it. So that's one thing I discovered is I feel totally creatively free. Once the barriers to your creativity are removed, the production is just amazing. So I'm really excited about that. So, and all the things that I do, my art, my cartoons, and my writing, all point to the same kind of thing. I think the one thread throughout my whole story is my desire to be free. And it's funny. Yesterday I was thinking of the movie. What's the one? Shoot, what's it called? Braveheart. Sorry, I had a brain fart there.
Yeah.
Where at the end he's getting his guts pulled out and he's crying, freedom.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels like that. Like I feel like my guts are being pulled out, but I'm free.
Yeah.
So
You did it your way. You did it the way you needed to do. Like Sinatra, I did it my way.
that's right.
Well, I started the podcast obviously for people who deconverted from Christianity and are now non-believers. When you think about that person or someone who was similar to you, maybe, what kind of encouragement or guidance would you offer that person?
What I would say, and what I do say, because these are the members of the Lasting Supper, is just encourage them that, what you've done is incredibly brave. I mean, just incredibly brave. It took a lot of courage to do what you did. And, most people do not do that. Most people conform for their whole lives. They don't want to disappoint anybody. They don't want to be rejected. They don't want to feel silly or ridiculed or whatever. And so what I say to people who've deconverted or, left the church or whatever, that took a lot of guts, and tap into that because there's incredible energy there, not just to undo things, but to do things. So I just want to encourage you to, you've really tapped into some powerful energy and to, keep tapping into that and, make a difference, continue making a difference in your own life and the life of those around you and the world.
That's excellent. It takes, these people who've gone through this, there's some grit that you have to have. There's some strength that you have to kind of tap into, like you said, to get through it. And then to realize at the end of it, you might feel beat down and broken and lost. But when you really think about it, that strength's still within you. That grit is still a part of who you are. And you can channel that again, and you can dig deep and recover from the trauma that is deconverting. But then, pick yourself up and you can do it, with the help of others and community and stuff. But I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, powerful, very, very courageous people. And you know what I find? Most of the members of the Lasting Supper are younger women. That takes a lot of guts, and American. When you're a young woman, part of an evangelical family living in the Bible Belt of the USA, for you to come out and say, I no longer believe this bullshit and I'm leaving the church, holy smokes, man.
Yeah.
Holy smokes, that takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, because even for me, I'm in the Pacific Northwest. It's quite liberal. It's one of the most unchurched places in the United States. So as much as there's a strong evangelical, presence in our area, it's nothing like being in Tennessee or Georgia or, something like that. Well, what's one, this is a silly question to ask, but what's one resource you would recommend for someone deconverting?
TheLastingSupper.com. But, I don't push it. I mention it once in a while because it's just such a genuine, authentic community, and I don't want to come across as salesy because it really is genuine and real people. So it's there though if you want to. But I have a book out. I write a letter every week to the community. We also have a private Facebook group, but I write a letter every week to the community called the Lasting Supper Letters for Deconstruction. So I actually compiled a bunch of them in a book I published this year. So you can get it on Amazon.
Cool.
Called The Lasting Supper Letters for Deconstruction by David Hayward. So pick that up. And I mentioned there's other books mentioned in there and things like that, other resources. And so, I would recommend that as a good place to start, to be honest.
What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Well, just Google Naked Pastor David Hayward. You're able to connect with me everywhere. I'm on all social platforms, but haywardart@gmail.com. That's my Gmail. It's available on my websites.
Okay, if you go to the website, it's like be able to connect with it in a lot of ways, it sounds like.
And I always answer right away. Like I love connecting with people. So I'd love to hear from you if you want to write.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, David, thank you so much for taking time to tell your story and also to share the great work that you're doing on your website and in the Lasting Supper. It's exciting. It kind of gets me excited just hearing about it.
Yeah, thanks.
So, and who is it? Who is it for? Can anyone join?
Anybody can join. It's for people who are deconstructing, though. So our number one value is we listen before we speak. We never give advice. We never judge. It's mutual respect for whatever journey you're on, whether you're a believer or an atheist or anywhere in between. We don't judge you. We just listen to your story. That's it. I find powerful results come from just sharing your story, just telling your story, and people just listening. You don't need to even hear back. The ability to tell your story has a powerful effect. So that's all we do. We just we promise, that we won't give advice or judge you or criticize you or anything. That's so anybody can join as long as they abide by those values.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks again for doing this, and I really enjoyed the conversation. We went all over the map. Talked a lot about movies a few times. That was kind of cool, and it was just a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. Anytime, actually.
Thanks for listening to Voices of Deconversion. Be sure to join us next time by subscribing to the podcast. If you have a deconversion story you would like to share, email us at steve@vodpodcast.com.
Something that I think about, and before I jump into this, 1 second, my dog just snuck in the room. Ryan, do you need something?
I just need something from the bathroom.
Okay, go ahead, and then will you take him out when you're done? Yeah. Sorry, David.
That's
You know what's funny is before I come on to the, before I'm set up my stuff, make sure the mic's where I need it and all this stuff, and about but I like try to, eliminate variables like the dog who could shake or bark or whatever during the podcast, right? But it's so funny. Did you see the Lawrence O'Donnell MSNBC outtake where he was getting like furious because someone was hammering right before his like show came on?
Oh, yeah.
Did you see that? Or Bill O'Reilly's the famous one where he flipped out like, "We'll do it live," Things happen, but it cracks me up because, like, you want to, like, make sure everything's the way it should be, but you good?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I was like, it makes them look like such assholes, Just like, dude, relax. Like, sorry that your show's not perfect,
Yeah.
Oh, God, that made me laugh, though. Okay, well, I was really enjoying what you were saying.